this is the, good afternoon, teacher. This is the December 10th, is it December 10th? December 10th, 2015 meeting of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Advisory Panel. And I'm Kate O'Connor, the chair, and I'm a citizen appointee of Governor Peter Shumlin. And the first thing we're going to do is have everyone introduce themselves. So I don't know if Steve, you want to start on that end?
I'm Steve Skibnowski. I represent the town of Vernon, and I'm a member of the panel.
David Andrews, representing the IBEW International 300, the president and former workers of Vermont Yankee.
I'm Chris Campen, executive director, Wyndham Regional Commission.
Jim Matto from Westminster. I'm a citizen member appointed by Senator Campbell.
I'm Chris Recchia. I'm Commissioner of the Public Service Department.
Martin Langeveld, a citizen member from Vernon, appointed by the governor.
Derek Jordan, a citizen member appointed by Shep Smith.
Jim Tonkovich, citizen member appointed by Senator Campbell.
Paradise, I am the decommissioning director at Vermont Yankee.
Thank you, everybody. I want to just do a brief overview of what the agenda is tonight. We're first going to have a discussion about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's advance notice of proposed rulemaking on decommissioning. Then what we want to do is we're going to get into a discussion on the advisory opinion. And tonight we're talking only about the advisory opinion on the certificate of public good on the second dry cast storage pad. So what we want to do, oh, I'm sorry. Look, I have my big people on the phone sign on. I forgot. People on the phone, I'm so sorry, I forgot you. I have a big sign. So do you want to go and tell us who is on the phone? And we can test if we can hear you.
Yeah, folks, why don't you just say something?
Do you want to start David Dean?
David Dean, appointed by Speaker Smith.
Pat Moulton. Pat, are you there? Okay, what about Bill Irwin? Is he there?
Yeah, Bill attempted to speak in again, and he's rather faint again.
Okay, how about Diane Becker?
Yes, this is Diane Becker, stated in New Hampshire.
Great. Can we hear Pat Moulton?
Pat, you were there before. Okay. Pat, you may need to unmute your line.
Can we tell Tony if they can hear us?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, folks, if you can just send a quick chat message, just so I know you folks can hear us. I know you could hear us before, but we seem to have lost Pat Moulton now.
Okay, well, while Tony's checking, we'll just do the brief overview of the agenda. So we're going to talk about... Oh, hi, Pat, can you hear us?
Tony, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Pat, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So, Tony, we're working on Bill Irwin, is that correct? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about the certificate of public good on the second dry cast storage pad. We'll have public comment on that, and then we'll get into a discussion as a panel. Then we're going to talk about our 2016 work plan. We had an initial discussion at the last meeting, but we want to go over it one more time because the issues committee has met, and we had a brief conversation about panel resources.
Tony or Kate?
Yes.
There seems to be some really strange feedback, and I'd like to hear Kate.
Can you hear that beeping, Tony?
Yeah, I'm not sure what... That may be Bill trying to come in again.
Well, there's like a...
I think if we all get on, say, 224, 501, 331, it should be fine.
Glad we're not echoing the plan.
Okay.
So you're suggesting we get off the go-to-meeting, Bill?
I'm not sure. That's just the theory that I have. Could be absolutely wrong.
It's better now, but when Kate was speaking, it was really loud.
Pat, can you, how about now? Is that good? Pat, can you hear us?
Yes,
Is that sound okay?
yes, now it is.
Yeah, now it is.
Okay.
And what about Bill and Diane?
Diane, are you there?
Yes, I'm on the computer now.
Okay.
And you can hear us, Diane?
Yes, I can.
Now, is Bill there?
Yes, I am here, and I can hear everybody. There is no echo.
Okay, perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to remember that you're there, and if you want us, if you want to yell to us that you want to say something, but I'm going to make an effort to ask.
Okay, someone's trying to come on.
Okay, it might be Trey. I'm gonna ask every once in a while if you folks want to say anything, but if I don't say it often enough, just pipe in. Okay, we all ready?
You also have the opportunity to type a message to Tony
Yes.
so he knows if you want to say something.
Perfect. And we won't forget you're there. I have a big sign. So I guess we want to go on to the first item on the agenda, which is the NRC's advance notice of proposed rulemaking. And I know there were a couple of people here that were on the phone, and I know that there might be people who want to say something about it. What I can do is just give a brief overview or just a brief about, I don't know if anybody here has read it. I'm assuming some people have. It's long if you haven't read it. But basically what the NRC has done is laid out what the issues are that they want to talk about or take up when they're actually doing the rulemaking. They had a conference call or a webinar on Wednesday, I believe, and it was an all-day thing, but basically what they did is they went through and just clarified or talked to everybody about what those issues were. One of the issues, at least from the citizen group that we had a meeting, the 6 of us, is the comment period ends on January 4th, which obviously comes at a time when there's a lot of things going on. So one of the issues that I'd like to talk about, but we'll have everybody else make comments first, is whether we as a group want to ask for an extension. I know, and I apologize, I have a letter that I forgot to bring with me. I did email it to everybody, that the citizens have written that we're going to send, regardless, you know, if the panel decides they don't want to ask for an extension for whatever reason, we will send a letter. So I don't know if anybody wants to talk about, oh yeah, everybody's got different copies. And I can read the letter if we get to that point, but before we do that, we'll have comments about what people are thinking about the rulemaking.
Thanks, Kate. This is Chris. So I very much support the extension of time submitted by you guys. I think that the delegation has recently also submitted a request for extension of time. You know, January 4th is coming upon us quickly. I think this is a very good opportunity for the Citizens Advisory Panel to weigh in on topics that they wish to see covered in the rulemaking, and I think we should take the extra time to do that, and I hope that the NRC will be responsive. My concern is that they'll extend the time but not let us know until January 3rd. So I think it's helpful to get the letter in sooner rather than later.
And I could just add that I think Chris just said it, the Vermont congressional delegation, along with Senators Warren and Markey from Massachusetts and Congressman Keating, who represents Plymouth, also signed the letter along with the Vermont delegation. Chris.
And the National Association of Development Organizations had a webinar yesterday where they host communities were made aware of the rulemaking that's going on, and they provided the host communities with a template with which to respond, also ask for an extension, 45 days.
So Kate, tell me if this is premature, but I guess I would offer a motion for the group I would encourage the whole panel to send the letter as you have described with edits if you need them on behalf of the whole panel. I don't see a reason for this to only be from the citizens. I'd make that motion.
Would it be helpful? Great. Yes, somebody here, was it David Andrews that did? Would it be helpful for me to read the letter? It's very short. I don't know if I sent it at the last minute, and I really apologize. Yeah, yeah. Is that okay for me to read the letter? I know I can't read your. It's very short, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page on what this letter says. And this is to the Secretary of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We are writing, and this will be edited if it goes from the panel, because this is as if it's going from the citizens. We are writing as the citizen members of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. Vermont's 19-member panel was formed by the Vermont legislature in 2014 in response to Entergy Corporation's announcement that it would close the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Station in Vernon, Vermont. We are pleased that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has begun the process of developing rules for the decommissioning of nuclear power reactors and look forward to taking part in the process. To that end, we are writing to request that the comment period for the recently published advance notice of proposed rulemaking be extended until February 4th, 2016, and ask that the NRC hold public meetings in the communities where plant decommissioning has begun or will in the near future. The rulemaking will have a direct impact on the communities that host nuclear power plants. Therefore, it is important that the public has the opportunity to participate and has confidence that the process is open and inclusive. Meetings held at the local level will give members of the public the chance to ask questions and get a better understanding of what the rulemaking will mean to them. The extension of the comment period will allow for adequate time to formulate meaningful comments, something made difficult by the publication date of the ANPR and the upcoming holidays. We appreciate your consideration of this request and look forward to continued public engagement as the rulemaking process moves forward. And the reason we use the February 4th date is that is the date that the Vermont congressional delegation, along with the Massachusetts delegation, used, and we sort of felt it would be good to be, at least on the Vermont side, to be consistent. So I don't know how. Does it? Oh. Does any other, Chris has made a motion, so we can talk about.
So in light of that, I guess I would amend my motion to, to have this come from the whole panel with the changes that that it be noted that it's from the whole panel instead of just from the citizens members. And then I guess my only edit was to suggest putting at least until February 4th rather than specifying February 4th, because there may be other people that want more time, and I don't think more time would be disadvantageous to us either. So that's my motion. And David's.
So I just want to, Entergy is already submitting comments by January 4th, so we do not, we support the citizens that are putting forth the letter asking the extension, but we'll abstain from voting on behalf of the NDCAP.
Does anyone on the phone have anything to say about this? Is it clear what we're thinking about doing?
This is Pat, and yes, and I fully support this coming from the entire panel.
This is Bill.
This is Diane, and I agree.
Okay, Bill, can you try speaking up again, please?
Yeah, this is Bill Irwin. I agree with the motion.
Take it easy. Have a safe trip back.
Does anyone else have any comments about either the letter? Well, we'll do the letter first, and then if anyone has any other comments about the process. Okay, because we have people on the phone, we need to go around and have, in essence, a roll call vote so that everybody can hear what we're doing. So, Steve, do you want to start on your end? We're voting on the motion to send the letter as a panel with the edits that it comes from all of us, and you saying at least February 4th.
Yes, I, Steve Skibniowski, support that motion. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, Kate's a yes too.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain.
Yes.
Okay. And what we'll do is we'll do it in. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the people on the phone. Pat Moulton.
Yes.
Bill Irwin.
Yeah.
Diane.
Yes.
And David Dean.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so what we're going to do is I will amend this letter, and I will send it around to everybody so everybody knows what we're sending out, and we'll get it out to the NRC ASAP so we can get that moving. And what I'll do, Paul, is we're going to make sure that we know how everybody voted, so we'll do that. Does anyone else have anything to comments or anything about the advance notice of proposed rulemaking? Nope. Okay. Yes, David.
If we do take votes, people pass the mics around. I have no idea what the outcome of the vote.
Oh, okay. Now I have to count people. Everybody said yes. Paul Paradise abstained. The people who aren't here are Mike Hebert, Mark McDonald, and Chris Wamser are the only people not here.
Trey.
Oh, Trey was going to call in, but we have not heard from him. Does that give you folks on the phone a picture of who's here?
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, now what we want to do is move on to the advisory opinions, and as I said, we're going to talk about one of them tonight, which is the CPG on the second pad. We have two opinions. One was authored by Jim Matteau, and the other one was authored by Entergy. I think we want to talk about the process in a minute. What I want to do is see if anybody in the public has any comments that they want to raise before we get into this discussion. Judy, and if you can go, I think there's a microphone over there.
And folks, you may have to turn the microphone on. There's a little on switch.
Did that turn it on or did it turn it off? I'm good. No. Sure.
Maybe turn it up. Can you hear me?
No.
No.
It was good before.
Now let me see. No? There's a button, but it's working both red and green.
Merry Christmas.
It's holidays.
It was working a few months ago.
Just have to hold it.
I have to hold it.
Yeah. Or Tony, what do you have your mic?
Yeah, let's try this.
It is celebrating the season.
Yeah, this one's working. You may have to hold it really close to your mouth.
So, can everybody hear me? Great. So this is a public comment about that has to do with not this ISF pad, but has to do with the proposal to that you have before you at some point, a draft opinion about should there be continued radiological emergency preparedness that you will have before you at some point. And the reason I'm bringing it up, and I talked with Kate about this, is because I was at the select board meeting in Brattleboro on Tuesday night, and they described how they were negotiating with Entergy about dismantling the sirens, and Entergy had come to them and said that they would dismantle the sirens for free and take them down, and there was some kind of a time limit on when the select board had to agree to that. Did you find out, Kate, about, was that part of the agreement?
did, and the deadline for deciding is December 15th.
So there was pressure from Entergy to make a decision on this pretty quickly. And I assume that if they're doing it with Brattleboro, they're also doing it with the other EPZ towns too. And I was concerned about this because, for several reasons. One, because they were doing this so hastily, and two, because you do have before you a draft opinion that you're going to be discussing about whether there should be continued funding for some kind of different level of radiological emergency planning. And you are the best informed group to discuss something like this and then make a recommendation. So I was wanting you to know about it to see if you as a panel would want to ask Entergy to stop negotiating with the towns at this point in time until you as a panel have a chance to fully discuss at some point next year that whole plan, to see if there's some kind of agreement among you folks about whether there should be some level of emergency preparedness and whether that would continue maintaining the sirens as a pretty major way to notify people in towns. And I know the RERP really recommends redundant systems of notification, so even if we have technology like Red Alert and Reverse 911, a lot of people don't carry cell phones, mine's always being charged, so I think redundant systems. So I'm just asking, would you want to talk about this and perhaps ask Entergy to delay this kind of notification until you have had a chance to do your deliberation on that draft plan? So that's my comment and my question to you.
Kate?
And again, this was Judy Davidson. I don't know if I ever announced myself.
Yes. Judy, this is Derek Jordan. I don't know if you guys heard the news today. Did you? So the news today that I heard on NPR was that NRC approved Vermont Yankees' request to end the 10-mile EPZ and go back to the fence line. So I think that's obviously a big factor in what you're asking for. It changes the game quite a bit. And that just happened today. Are you guys aware of that too? Yeah, okay. If someone would like to speak to that and what that leaves us to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. And this is Chris Recchia. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, just today the NRC agreed the reduction in the elimination of the 10-mile zone and the emergency planning. From the state standpoint, we're not done with this yet, so we are still evaluating our options based on the NRC rules. And I think it would be premature for Entergy to remove them. I hope they recognize that. This is not a change that occurs before April of next year, so I don't understand the urgency to get towns to agree to this or not agree to it right now. I'll certainly bring that to my conversations with Entergy, because I do think it's premature, and I think it's, in light of all that's going on, I think that's probably not in their best interest to do that right now. So, thank you.
Yeah, so basically, when we did approach the towns, we gave the towns an option of keeping the siren and maintaining it, have the town maintain it themselves, or Entergy would remove it at the cost to the company. I would suspect that, you know, the time limit has to do with lining up a vendor to be able to take the tower down, the siren down. So, as Chris said, we'll probably talk about it more, but right now that's basically our stance is we gave the option to the towns and they chose, you know, what they wanted to do with them.
Chris, I think I heard you on the radio today also saying in response to this that you felt, or the state felt, that as long as the fuel is in the pool, we should maintain the 10-mile EPCs and not reduce it to the fence line.
Yes, that's been our position, and we feel what they stated today was consistent with that. I hope you heard what you heard today. I hope was consistent with that.
I guess that's a question to Paul. Paul, is Entergy able to give the towns an extension period of time to make a decision about whether to take you up on the offer of removing the sirens or not?
Chris, I couldn't answer that right now because like I said, I was speculating on the time frame ahead, but I would have to check and see why we put out a December 15th. I'm just suspecting that it's lining up a vendor and making sure you get your contracts out and things like that. But we did, so you got to have the town say what they want to do, and then whether they want to keep it or not, we would have to get someone to go do the work. So I can look into it, but right now I think that's what I suspect.
Judy implied the question. I didn't know if this is going, I don't even know where all the sirens are. It's more than just Brattleboro. And so the same thing is happening in other places as well.
Sirens that will be retired.
And so that discussion is happening with the select board in each town.
That's correct. I don't know if it goes through their select board, but whoever we normally deal with.
Yeah. As a member of the Brattleboro Select Board, there are 6 sirens. We voted just on Tuesday night to have them taken down. They'll be taken down, though, after April of 2016. They're not taken down today, but it's still, yeah. Oh.
It would seem logical to assume from all of that if something takes a turn and what the state is seeking prevails, then this doesn't go forward, correct?
I think beyond any agreement that we would have with a town, all we're doing is giving them an option. If something comes through where the state, there's something that has us keep the sirens, we would keep them.
That's right. It's not until the NRC implements the plan, which is supposedly going to be done in April 2016. But whenever that happens, it's a time frame. I don't know if it's 60 days or whatever after a certain time frame that the sirens will either stay with the town or they'll go. David?
So the town of Vernon had their select board meeting this past Monday evening, and they voted to keep their sirens. And I believe the annual fee was $500 a year or something like that to maintain. So the town decided from an all hazards point of view to keep their sirens.
Anyone and the public have any other comments? Anything particular? Oh, Leslie.
How's that? Okay. I am here tonight. My husband starts chemotherapy tomorrow, and so I'm going to leave after I make my comments. I'm just letting you know that because I know some of you know him and how important this is to both of us. I really want to commend Endicap for the progress that you've made since last September. The ease with which you just took care of that piece of business with the letter asking for an extension really gladdens my heart and gives me confidence for the future. You're working well together despite a rocky start. I do think it's and I also wanted to commend Endicap for the recent article I read about working with other community advisory panels in our region on nuclear waste, and I think that's a great way to go, to work with other community advisory panels. I hope that the extension for public comment on decommissioning with the NRC is extended past February 4th so that perhaps that topic could be brought up at the next Endicap meeting. I'm not really sure that that's been fully explored by Endicap, and just in case it's not, one thing that I would recommend people advise either as individuals or as a panel is that the NRC set aside money from its budget, separate from the Decommissioning Trust Fund, for citizen advisory panels to have financial support, to hire experts to come in, and to receive training for a couple of months before they start working together. So please consider that when making your comments. In terms of the, where are we? We're talking about the, the second efficacy. Myself and the Safe and Green campaign really support the recommendation of the Wyndham Regional Commission and the proposal put forward. The part of it that says we should have one consolidated pad that is far enough away from the reactor building that there won't be any question that if for some reason the DOE doesn't take the waste away in time, that decommissioning of the reactor won't be delayed. I did find it a bit humorous that in the Entergy comments and their proposal, a couple of paragraphs down, they end, the DOE has been in breach of its contractual obligations since January 1, 1998. The next line is, ENVI and state agency plans are based in part on the assumption that DOE will remove spent fuel on a schedule consistent with the agency's current strategy for managing the nation's spent nuclear fuel. I mean, 1998 and trusting that they're going to keep to a schedule is somewhat laughable. I know there's a lot of hope about Texas and things like that, but then there's also a lot of questions about transportation. Are our roads and railways going to be in any better shape by 2020 or 2054 than they are now? I guess it really depends upon what happens on the national level. But I certainly, and really very few people that I know, have the faith in the DOE that Entergy seems to have, and find it really difficult to believe that a piece of property cannot be developed either on the site or adjacent to the site to put a pad where this would no longer be in question. And just in case you get to the RERP tonight, I took a look at it and talked it over with my fellows, and we do support Dr. Irwin's proposal. It seems to be a real common sense proposal that emergency planning be based upon what the level of risk is in terms of what phase the decommissioning is at the time. So either we'll support that this evening if you go there, or at a future date. And again, thank you all for the good work you've done this year. Keep it up, and we'll see you next year.
Leslie. Yes, and send our best to Gary. Is there anyone else in the public that wants to make a comment? Okay, now we're going to move on to the panel discussion. And we've never had two opinions before, so we're going into new territory. And I'm going to make a couple of suggestions, and then people can weigh in on, this is just on the process. Since we have two, and they're pretty different, they're two separate ways paths to take, my recommendation would be that we would talk about them and then vote, as opposed to talking about one voting and then talking about the other and voting, since they are really intertwined. When we put together this process, we discussed the ability to vote on two of them. One could be a majority, or seen as a majority opinion. The other one could see as a minority opinion. In which case we would send both opinions up to the Public Service Board, making it clear who voted how or who abstained. Obviously, at this point, we don't know who plans to abstain from voting, so there could be all of us voting, there could be 5 of us voting. We don't know, so that's another issue. One of the things that Jim and I had spoken about, and his suggestion, which I actually think is a good one, is instead of really nitpicking on something, you know, the commas and the periods, that perhaps what we need to do is talk about the substance of each thing, and then, you know, nitpick about the commas and the little typos. If you see something that's just minor and doesn't have anything to do with the substance. So I don't know how people feel about that in the process and moving forward. Anybody in the room want to say something?
Thanks, Kate. I think that's a fine idea. A question in terms of officiality: do you want us to move both of them into discussion? Because if so, I would make a motion to do that, and then we could have a discussion about both of them simultaneously, and then pick them one at a time. So I'm not proposing this motion as a voting motion. I'm moving both of them for discussion purposes.
People on the phone, do you understand what our plan is? Which is to take both of them, talk about both of them at the same time, but wait and vote after we've had our discussion.
This is Pat, that makes sense to me.
Okay. My recommendation would be that we talk about Jim's first, and then we talk about the other one, the Entergy one, second, since that's the order in which they were submitted. Does that sound good?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could suggest, I'm not sure that having a motion on the table is necessary. If you will, the chair can begin a discussion. I'm not sure that the motion is votable as made. So
we could take it as a recommendation.
Maybe we withdraw the motion, and that you, as the chair, open a discussion of the two versions.
Okay. Okay, everybody's withdrawn everything. Okay, so why don't we start with Jim, and he can talk about his, and then we can have a conversation about that. And obviously, these things are going to overlap each way, but we might as well start with Jim.
Thanks. No, as Kate mentioned, everyone has 2 versions of this. The initial version that I did in October, and the Entergy revision that Paul sent out, I think, on December 1st. And, I mean, the reason I think we should talk about what direction, if any, we want to take, and not spend time on the wording, because we might spend an hour talking about one that we then decide not to take up. I think that there's a clear difference we can look at. Essentially, the Entergy revision is, I guess, what in legislative language would be called a strike-all amendment, and substitutes it with a recommendation that fully supports the petition for a CPG that's been filed. So they are night and day different. The other thing, it seems to me, is that when we do get around to voting on these, we could send one, we could send the other, we could send neither. And there may be reasons why someone would vote no on both of them. It's probably going to get a little muddy, but I think it would work that way. The only thing I would say is that the original one called for relocating the proposed Dispizzi to avoid the obvious necessity of building a third one someday, and the cost that goes with that. The alternative proposed by Envy would have us support putting the second pad almost immediately adjacent to the existing one. Not much more to say. That's the difference. I think people can talk about it and decide. There is one quibble I would like to make. is that in the Entergy revision, it did say in the section called Note to Panel that the original draft, this is a quote, the original draft advisory opinion reflects statements and opinions expressed in the docket 8300 testimony submitted on behalf of the Wyndham Regional Planning Commission. That's both true and irrelevant. There were 7 citation items cited in that. 4 of them were taken directly from Entergy's site assessment study, which everyone has got the blue book and look at the pages that were cited there. One of them, and some were cited in WRC testimony, such as the statement by Entergy's counsel in a letter. But no matter how many times they're quoted or by whom or in what setting, they remain Entergy statements. So I think a more accurate characterization would be to say that the original draft advisory opinion primarily reflects statements made by Entergy on the record. And that would be my main reason for suggesting we stay with it.
Turn it over to David for 1 second, but I just want to, and maybe this is not the time to raise this, but it's time to, it could be, we should think about this because it could save us doing commas and everything. Are we sending just the recommendation, which is the 2-line sentences, or are we planning to, is everyone thinking we're sending everything? Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, David.
And the answer to that question was what, Kate?
In the whole thing, Pat.
Okay, thank you.
That was my best Kate imitation.
Don't quit.
Don't give up your day job.
Yeah, don't quit your day job. So on the Jim's draft, the first thing that struck me was the very last paragraph in the first page. And I'll try to keep my comments brief here. It says, the presence of spent nuclear fuel in close proximity to the facilities to be dismantled could present significant obstacles, both physical and financial, to the planned decommissioning and dismantlement process. And then the rest of the document goes on working off that assumption or that predication, but there was really no basis for that statement. The paragraph at the top of the next page says, at the time decontamination and dismantlement are scheduled to start, ENVI assumes all spent fuel will have been removed from the site and therefore will not affect the decommissioning activities. Right. Now, if we look in, paragraph 8 is the reference that was made about 2007. Entergy's counsel stated in a letter, dry fuel storage plants following shutdown in 2032. I think, unless I'm missing something, I think this is a really big part of this. In 2007, the plan was to continue to run the plant until 2032. By 2032, there would be more fuel generated than obviously when we shut down in 2014. That additional fuel would not fit where the second pad is. That was the basis for the companies making their statements about having to put possibly a third pad or a pad outside the protected area because it simply would not fit inside the protected area. Subsequent to that, we've shut down. The company has not only stated their intentions, there's a docket out to actually put the second pad there. There is testimony. There's the pre-file testimony from Mr. George Thomas provided to the PSB on June 30th, 2014 regarding the second ISFISI. Mr. Thomas described the alternatives to a second ISFISI pad in his answer to question 30 on that pre-file testimony, which, as I read it, made it clear to me that Entergy has provided evidence that a third pad is not required. So those facts, as I read it, contradicted the statement in the recommendation section of the opinions that reads, the likely and perhaps predictable need for yet a third ISFISI. It just seemed clear to me that we're looking at facts prior to the plant shutdown announcements, which kind of was a game changer for the calculations for the size of the pads. Further, there's the comments about the possible interferences with the dismantlement of the plant with the fuel there. I don't know how many people are familiar with the site here, but there is one pad there already that did go through the the state CPG process and was approved, and there is fuel there, and the second pad that's going through the CPG process is physically right next to it. I would think that if it wasn't a problem for the first pad, it wouldn't be a problem for the second pad. In a nutshell.
Thank you, David. And then, so this is Chris. So I had some of the same thoughts, that there's nothing in the record that I'm aware of that it requires that the pads be removed in order to do the decontamination and dismantlement. But probably, more fundamentally, I would offer that the first pad was Thanks. The first pad was constructed and then ultimately paid for and reimbursed by the Department of Energy. My larger concern with this is holding up the process for decontamination and dismantlement and taking any funds from the Decommissioning Trust Fund. As you know, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has allowed and agreed that spent fuel management is a legitimate cost from the Decommissioning Trust Fund. We are opposing that, but nonetheless, I'm concerned that if another pad is constructed independent of this, in order to move the 13 casks that are currently on the site on the existing pad, that the Department of Energy will not pay for those costs, and it's likely in the hundreds of millions of dollars, 145 to do the rest of the work. So I suspect it's over $100 million that would come out of the fund likely and not be reimbursed likely by Department of Energy. I am also concerned about the timing, so I very much appreciate Jim's proposal here, but the department can't support construction of a site elsewhere at this point.
So I will point everybody to page 24 of the site assessment study, wherein Entergy said, at the time decontamination and dismantlement are scheduled to start, NV, Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee, assumes all spent fuel will have been removed from the site and therefore will not affect the decommissioning activities. If DOE's removal of spent fuel is delayed beyond the assumed completion date, or the decontamination and dismantlement activities are accelerated and start before the removal of the fuel, the presence of the fuel may inhibit demolition or restrict the methodologies available for demolishing the reactor building and or structures adjacent to the stored spent fuel. In the Department of Public Services questions to Entergy about this in the docket, Senior Project Manager George Thomas stated, without waiving objections, as stated in Entergy VY's October 2014 Site Assessment Study, page 58, the removal of all spent nuclear fuel makes the performance of major decommissioning activities substantially less complicated and materially reduces overall security issues on the site. And then they cite the a website or a HTML location for that information. He continues, accordingly, the three higher cost estimates for immediate decon, which assume completion of major decommissioning activities with fuel on the site, and then parentheses, but do not account for the added complexity of having fuel movement campaigns in parallel with dismantling and decommissioning work, close parentheses, are more appropriate estimates for this purpose than bracket estimating the cost of dismantling and decontamination while fuel remains on the site. Entergy VY has not undertaken an analysis of how spent nuclear fuel remaining on the site would affect specific dismantlement and decontamination activities beyond these general observations and the solicitation of the decon cost estimates. To at least some extent, however, the impact on dismantlement and decontamination activities as spent nuclear fuel remains on the site already exists as a result of the existing ISFC and may not be materially different with the addition of the project. Then you could, of course, argue about whether or not the ISFC should have been located there in the first place. In its comments on the PSDAR to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission concerning the spent fuel pickup assumption date by the Public Service Department, says that Entergy's 2052 date for the completion of the removal of spent nuclear fuel is not only unrealistic and dependent on a change to current federal law, but is also directly contrary to statements of the Vermont Public Service Board, the NRC, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. In its questions to Barrett Green, filed on December 13, 2014, on the draft PSDAR, the Public Service Department asks, concerning SAS Section 2.3.2, page 24, this section discusses how the presence of the ISFC could hinder demolition activities depending on the timing of DOE performance. Explain how this potential impact was considered in deciding the location of the new ISFC pad. Explain if this potential impact was considered in deciding whether the new ISFC pad would supplement the existing pad capacity, or if the new ISFC pad would be sized such that it would have sufficient space for all 58 anticipated casts. Explain any evaluation performed of any scenario where the DOE performance is delayed long enough that in order to complete the license termination work within 60 years after shutdown, the work would have to be done with spent fuel still being stored on the current ISFC pad. If no evaluation of such a scenario was done, explain why not. So to me, the fundamental issue here is that Entergy has said if the fuel remains on the site, it could further complicate. Hello, breaker 19. Okay. Further complicate it and also make it more expensive. And I know, and I'll just, information that's already on the record, public consumption. But to me, we've got a fundamental question here, which is, and now of course we also have the waste confidence rule, which says that spent fuel can remain on the site indefinitely. So it would seem like the presence of the spent fuel on the site could create some complications. And so, you know, maybe having the pad in that location is the right thing to do. But it just seems like it would be in the community's best interest, looking out for future generations, to make sure that if those pickup assumptions are incorrect, then it's not going to further delay decommissioning, it's not going to increase the cost, it's not going to further encumber the decommissioning trust, and that we frankly have the responsibility of the future generations to come up with a resolution for that. And I'll leave it there.
So that's really helpful. I think that, you know, the department did ask those discovery questions because we were interested in the result, and I don't have the answers with me, but my recollection was, and Chris, maybe you do, but my recollection was that Entergy has indicated that they could do decontamination and dismantlement with the pads in place where they're proposed to do them, and there's no contamination underneath those pads. So if I'm wrong about that, I'll be happy to be corrected, but that's my understanding of their answers to those discovery questions. And the importance of it was why we asked those questions, because we felt it was important to know.
Yeah, I do want to point out one little error, which is in Jim's opinion. The line about the quote near the bottom from the SAS that says DOE will start transferring spent fuel from the site beginning in 2016, and so that should be 2026, and that kind of negates the next line, because 2016 is not even remotely likely, but 2026, who can say? So I don't know if you want to offer any revisions there other than correcting the date. And I guess the central issue that we've just been discussing about whether the decommissioning, the deconstruction of the facilities would be made more difficult with both of the ISFACs near the plant is really kind of the central issue here between these two positions. And so I guess I'd like to ask Paul or anyone else from VY to address that and to maybe sort of give us the lay of the land. How close are these ISFACs actually to the building? I know that when you go to New York City, they've managed to tear down, skyscrapers while keeping the sidewalk open. So, you would think that with a little ingenuity and some distance between the ISFAC and the building here, that could be done reasonably. But that's the question I'd like to ask.
And I was going to address that actually and kind of go further on what Commissioner Recchia pointed out. And Chris, you pointed to the estimates that Entergy had 3 companies do to look at immediate decon and dismantlement. And in those estimates, there was no impact to taking the reactor building down due to the proximity of the ISFAC. The costs that they estimated did not show any impact for that work. And as Martin pointed out, it's about 25 feet from the pad to the reactor building. And if you look at the, it would just be on that side that you would just have to use a different methodology. And that's basically what you also read, that you would need to use some alternate methodology to take that side of the reactor building down.
I just want to check in with the people on the phone. Do you have anything that you want to ask?
This is Bill Irwin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Bill.
I wonder whether there's been a cost analysis to construct the kind of security and other support in addition to a new site for the ISFAC, and whether that would further erode the already precious amounts of money in the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund, and whether that could be a significant challenge to that fund.
I guess I'll answer that by, and Commissioner Recchia pointed this out. If we were to move the pad to a different location, which I think in what we've already presented, there is no other location on the site that we own, and we can't put it outside of our fence. It would be at least what the cost of doing the work that we have left, and we didn't even look at the security impact. We would have to, as Dr. Irwin points out, we would have to build another security facility in addition to the security facility that exists for the rest of the site. So it would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars to do this work.
No, I think.
Just a quick question. Are you saying
I have a question regarding other plants that have gone through this, Yankee Row or whatever. In any of those instances, were the ISFAC pads located as close to the reactor plant as they are at VY?
Does anyone in the room know the answer to that question?
This is Bill Irwin. I think that most of the plants that have decommissioned elsewhere have had the ability to plan it so they didn't have to be as close as they are, because they were simultaneous processes. They moved the fuel and then went right into decontamination and dismantling, and so it was all planned in one broad project.
This
Okay,
is, there were
thank
no,
you.
and this is Chris. What I was going to add.
Oh, now it's working. Look, seems to be the purpose of moving it to another location is to facilitate decontamination and dismantlement, I think. Perhaps a secondary purpose is to facilitate reuse of the site. I grant you that this ISFSI pad in the current location make reuse difficult. I think we've dealt with the first one, which is that we will be able to do the decontamination and dismantlement with the ISFSI pad in its proposed location and current location. And then in terms of reuse, I would point out that like maybe some odd acres and had the ISFSI pad established, and there is no reuse of that site yet. So I don't think that the location of the pad is the primary driving factor for whether a site can be reused or not. So again, I appreciate the intent here. I think I understand it, but the added costs that would be incurred and threatening to be incurred by the Decommissioning Trust Fund are of tremendous concern to me. So.
Just a clarifying question for Paul. You said the distance from the ISFSI pads to the reactor building is 25 feet? I'm thinking it's probably 25 feet to the service building and significantly more to get to the reactor building. Yeah.
I know that David hugs the casks, so he knows how far they are. Steve?
Just a note regarding the sentiment of the town of Vernon, and of course I haven't talked to everyone there, but I did present this advisory opinion to the select board on the order of about a month ago. And the concern that was raised there that we discussed was the need to move forward with the removal of the fuel from the spent fuel pool, and that moving either one or both pads to some other location on site would certainly delay and probably significantly increase the cost of actually doing that. And certainly it would also increase the size of the area that would perhaps be not as available in the future. So we discussed that at the select board meeting, and the select board members that I spoke with were certainly in favor of proceeding with the energy proposal that's before the Public Service Board at this point. They just to note, the Vernon Select Board does have I don't know whether you call it intervener status or whatever, but with this docket at the Public Service Board, but as far as I'm aware, they have not made any official contact with the PSB other than to request the intervener status. So from the Vernon perspective, certainly most of the people that I've talked to are certainly interested in continuing this process and getting this accomplished. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jim Matto again. A couple of points. One, to address one of Chris Recchia's points. Nowhere in the initial draft did it state, or was it intended to be addressing future reuse of the site. I think it's prudent to assume that long after everyone in this room is dead and buried, that mothball plant will be sitting there with spent fuel and dry gas right next to it. 60 years is a long time, and I can't tell you where it is on the record because I haven't seen it there, but I have been told directly by an NRC staff person fairly high up, when asked about the future on these things, this was a few years ago, that there was, to his knowledge, no rule prohibiting the extension of a second safe store period. So I wouldn't count on anything going on there. I am looking at the fact that for whatever reasons prior to this, Entergy statements were that a pad in a different location would be needed. And if it's going to be needed, it's going to be needed. If not now, later. As David mentioned, there's less fuel there now, but it's still not going anywhere. And I appreciate the town of Vernon's concern about the time, and I think everyone has a concern about how long these things take. But in all candor, the track record for the 25 years that I've been involved is that proposals for CPGs come in late with a statement that we have to hurry, there's not much time, and then everyone falls in line. That might be the right thing to do, but let's do it with our eyes open.
One more item I'd like to point out is we started the process of the second ISFSI pad in 2013. So if we were to start over today, we don't have approval right now. You're talking a minimum of 3 years before we get approval. The downstream effect of that is that all fuel will not be into dry storage by 2020. And the effect of that is the staff reductions cannot happen, which is a majority of your costs that are being borne by the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund. And I think everyone knows the time value of money. The work that would need to be done, even if it had to be done a little harder or different to remove the reactor building close to a pad, is much less than the amount of money we'd be spending earlier if we push this pad to a different location. And just want to point out, Jim, you made a comment that we would need a third pad. We've already done the studies. We know how many canisters are needed, and we know this second pad will handle all of the canisters that are required. So we're confident there's not a need for a third pad.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yes, is that David Dean?
Yes.
Yes, you can go right ahead.
I wanted to explore just a little bit that notion that a third site might never be necessary, either through additional high-level waste that needs storing or fuel or whatever. I hear, if you will, and I don't mean to be pejorative about this, but I hear lip service that if we do a third site or you know, it would never happen. I've heard never happen a lot about this nuclear plant, and somehow various things do seem to happen. What kind of assurance are you offering us that a third site would not be necessary? I mean, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to make it a pejorative question, but what assurance are you offering us?
I appreciate the comment, never happened, and I don't believe I said never happened. I said we were confident, based on the engineering studies that were done, of the fuel that we have, the amount of fuel that needs to go into casks that are licensed to be on each pad. And and you also brought up the point of other high-level waste. We've also done an engineering study for that, and right now we would only need one canister for the high-level waste, and that will definitely fit on the second pad also.
So I just want to explain one of the reasons why Wyndham Regional Commission has been asking questions. It's not because we want to see the offloading of the fuel from the pool into the dry cask. either. But when we go back and look at the prior record, I think this is important. Decommissioning cost analysis, January 2007, section 2, page 4 of 12, bullet 1. Quote, construct the North 40 ISPC scenarios 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. Relocate the spent fuel storage pool assemblies and the fuel in the PA ISPCs so that decommissioning or safe storage preparations can proceed on the power block structures. Decommissioning cost analysis 2007. New ISPC constructed in the North 40 to support decommissioning operations. Fuel relocated from the PA ISPC to the North 40 ISPC at shutdown. Same decommissioning cost analysis. In scenario 2, fuel remains in storage on the PA pad during building demolition. As such, the duration for the demolition period is extended as compared to other scenarios. The longer scenario allows for additional safeguards to be put in place. The use of more benign dismantling techniques and or modifications to the dismantling sequence as an added precaution. In remaining scenarios, fuel is transferred from the PA to the North 40 ISPC away from the power block. Decommissioning cost analysis, February 2012. A second ISPC is constructed at the site to accommodate all the spent fuel generated from the reactor operations. Relocate the spent fuel storage pool assemblies and fuel on the original ISPC so that decommissioning can proceed on the power block structures. Same cost analysis. The duration of the building demolition phase assumes that all fuel has been transferred to the new ISPC. It also assumes that the new SPC is located far enough away from the power block so as not to require any additional safeguards to be put in place for the protection of the fuel and or the use of more benign dismantling techniques. So that's been the past record of Entergy. That's what you've been saying in the decommissioning cost analysis. So I'm glad to hear that it sounds like you've changed your mind and it's not going to cost more. It's not going to be more difficult to decommission or dismantle the power block. So what I would ask now is for Entergy to absolutely guarantee that if your pickup assumptions are incorrect, that you will not further burden the decommissioning trust fund. You will not further delay decommissioning. That what you're saying is absolutely true, and that people here 60 years from now or whenever that site is decommissioned will not have to worry about where you've chosen to locate the spent fuel is going to further delay decommissioning. And I think that's a reasonable guarantee to ask for.
I have not been authorized to give you that guarantee tonight.
Continue my line of questioning.
Well, we're sort of getting an answer.
Trying to answer that. Yeah.
We're going to let Paul answer the question that Chris Campney just posed.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what Chris is reading from. He's got a copy of something that no one else has here at the table. So, and you also said scenario, so I would assume there's probably more than one scenario in there. So you're reading from maybe three different scenarios, and so I think if we want to get into an argument about it, it would be fair that everyone have all the same documents. But I'm not going to guarantee anything like that. All I can tell you is what is in the cost estimate now, the estimates that 3 different vendors did who all have experience in decommissioning. And I'll point out too, we do have a commitment with the state of Vermont in the settlement agreement, MOU, that as soon as there is enough money in the trust fund, we will commence planning for decommissioning. So that's what I'll tell you is we will follow the agreements that we have in place.
This is Chris Recchia again. Chris, I appreciate what you're reading. I think some of it was talking about moving the spent fuel from the pool to dry cask in order to be able to do the power block, but notwithstanding that, I would absolutely agree with you if I thought that Entergy was representing anything other than that they could dismantle and decommission, decontaminate the site with the pad in its proposed location, but they are saying they can do that. And I do know that the cost would be extraordinary to move it to another location, even absent security issues. So all I can say is, we'll fully explore that in briefing with the board, but that's my understanding that that the new location of the second ISFSI pad and the existing location of the existing ISFSI pad do not cause impediments to the decontamination dismantlement of the site. If that's not true, I'll be right with you, but I do think that to be the case.
David Dean.
This is David Dean, and that's an interesting segue to my follow-up. We are being assured by Entergy that this plan is going to work. I am curious at what level has the department or any third independent party review the engineering and cost estimates. And I am directing that question, of course, to Commissioner Recchia. But to anybody else, both on the panel or in the audience that has taken a look at these engineering reviews and the cost estimates associated with them. And I would say not only from an engineering perspective, but I would really be interested to see whether or not an economist has taken a look at the assumptions relative to those costs over time. So, Commissioner?
Thank you, Representative Dean. So, I'll talk about the physical aspects of it, because I think which is that in the context of the Public Service Board process, we are trying to ensure that there's no contamination beneath the pads or adjacent to the pads, or any physical aspect of the power block that would be of concern in decontamination dismantlement. And we have had professional folks looking at that, as well as the Agency of Natural Resources looking at the borings and things under that where the pad would go. I don't think we have looked at the economics of a third location, if that's what your question was. One, because we don't think a third location was necessary, and I understand where Jim and Chris are coming from the prior statements, but we don't think a third location is going to be necessary, and we do think there's a
My question isn't specifically to the third location.
Okay.
My question is to of completing the second pad, and everybody's claiming, well, to redo this, it's going to be more expensive and whatever. I've not seen any information that would convince me that there is an associated with taking this approach of consolidating the waste in one location. And what I'm questioning is, why is everybody so sure that in fact the costs are legitimate, that they project into the future at a real rate? So relative to that. Now, I have missed it, and you can refer me to it, but my question is about the assumptions that are being presented about having two locations right next to each other.
Okay, so let me try and answer it as best I can, which is just to say, in general, let's take for a moment that each time you construct a pad and move dry casks, it's in the $120 to $150 million range. So, regardless of where you put a second pad, it will cost that much. And you could build a second pad somewhere else to accommodate the fuel on the existing pad, The problem is, David, who pays for that? Now, the Department of Energy has paid for the existing site.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Okay, I'll repeat that. The Department of Energy has paid for the existing site. If that is going to be relocated, it is, in my mind, highly unlikely that the Department of Energy would say, oh yeah, we'll pay another $150 million to relocate that. Now, that's my assumption, and that's what I'm basing my point on. If they would, then, you know, albeit I'm a U.S. taxpayer too, I would welcome the opportunity to do it. But I guess that I would think that they would say no. So if you don't move the first pad and you build a second pad in a second location, you're doubling your costs of security and all those other issues without solving the underlying problem that's perceived here, that the first pad is in the way of decontamination and dismantlement or effective reuse of the site after that. So neither of those are solved unless you move the existing pad. And if you move the existing pad, I suspect you are incurring those costs on behalf of Vermont Yankee alone, and not something that the Department of Energy would consider reimbursement for, having already paid for it once.
David, does that... David, Dean?
Yes.
Are you all set? Do you want to ask another question?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else on the phone want to ask a question or make a comment? Doesn't sound like it. Anyone on the panel? Oh, Paul. Yeah.
I want to make one more comment based on what Commissioner Recchia just said. You know, moving the pad to another location on the site, we do not know from an engineering standpoint whether that's feasible. Everything that we've looked at right now says it's not. And it also isn't from the standpoint of the radiological impact to people outside of the fence. I think making an assumption that we can actually, from an engineering and technical standpoint, move the pad, that's jumping to a pretty big conclusion. We would have to do studies and soil samples similar to what we did on the existing pads to be able to even get it approved by the NRC.
This sort of, I couldn't quite figure out if we're commenting on both of these together, but Paul, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I underlined and I didn't understand was in your comment, and you referred to the docket 8300, which I have to admit I haven't read, but it said these disadvantages include increased radiation doses to members of the public and additional aesthetic impacts to neighboring residential properties. That I can understand, but I don't understand the increased radiation dose to members of the public. Could you explain that?
Yeah, right now the existing pad is about as far from the fence as you can technically have it, and not, you know, be too close to the river, and then too close to the reactor building. So anywhere else you would put a pad based on the footprint that we presently have, you would be very close to our licensed fence line, and therefore the fence line dose impact would be fairly significant. And I don't have the data on that, you know, the empirical data, but it's definitely much more than where it's at right now.
With regard to the first SPC, so in 7082, when the board made this decision, they said the time we've introduced Vermont Yankees proposal raises some concern. This was for the first one, this is in docket 7082. because the project is the only facility that could be successfully constructed before Entergy Vermont Yankee exhausts capacity of the spent fuel pool. If we had found that one of the alternatives was preferable, timing alone might have rendered that alternative infeasible unless the board was willing to risk the potential loss of the economic benefits of Vermont Yankee. As we do not find the alternatives are clearly preferred, this potential dilemma is not before us. However, in the future, Entergy Vermont Yankee must file its request for approval under Section 248 sufficiently far in advance to ensure an opportunity for meaningful consideration and implementation of alternatives. So I just, since we're talking about the location of the first one and what the basis was for that decision, the board said, hey, it would have been great if we could have considered other alternatives, but we didn't have the time. Chris, I guess I'll come back to you and ask if you're comfortable about this, about the proposed location of the second ISPC. Will the state ask for a guarantee from Entergy that if the assumptions are incorrect, that they're not going to let that further burden the decommissioning time or cost?
Great idea, and we will explore that in the briefing on the ISPC pad, because all indications are it should not interfere with decontamination and dismantlement. If it turns out that you are right and that is a problem and impedes the full restoration of the site for any purpose, but for the fact obviously that you still have that fuel there, we will explore that and make sure that is addressed by Entergy, and not at our cost at this point, meaning the cost of the decommissioning trust fund. I agree with that.
So when you're saying if I'm right, are you meaning if as we're discussing it now, or if 60 years from now when we're all dead, we're right or wrong? So I'm trying to figure out what the timing is you're talking about. Are you talking about in this document?
I mean, it's this issue and resolve it now, because I don't anticipate being around in 60 years to address it. And remember, the whole goal of this is to get this done sooner, not delay things or add costs. And so that's our focus, is to make sure that we can make the decommissioning trust fund go as far as possible to getting this done. And, and we need to pursue the permanent or interim storage elsewhere, not in Vermont. So that we need to do that too. I can't give you a guarantee, but I can tell you that we're absolutely on making sure that our understanding is correct, which is that as represented before the board, we do decommission and dismantlement.
With the ISPC pads in the location that they are proposed. Everybody hear that?
Yeah, I was going to say, the next part of that statement.
No.
I'm not sure I can, David, because the microphone keeps cutting out, but in the location at which they're proposed, it is our understanding there's no interference with decontamination and dismantlement. If that is not the case, we will explore that in this docket now.
So it's easy to ask for a guarantee then?
It's very easy to ask for a guarantee. Are you asking me for a guarantee, or you want me to ask them for a guarantee?
As the Public Service Department,
yeah, nice.
will the PSD be asking for a guarantee that the decision to locate the second FSC where it's located will not further delay decommissioning or increase the cost?
I think that's a great question. You're part of the docket. We are part of the docket. Let's do that.
So again, I just wanted to make clear, Chris, you've spoken twice to this issue. In the first time that you were speaking, it was on page 10 and 11 of your testimony from August 18th. In the footnote you're reading is docket 7082 board order from April of 2006 and the decommissioning cost analysis of January 2007. The last time you spoke, again, it was it starts off when Entergy issued when Entergy VY filed its docket 7082 petition for the original ISFISI in 2005. These are great statements back 8-10 years ago, but things have changed. These were predicated on operating until 2032, and we're not. So terms have changed. It's an apple and orange type comparison here.
So I appreciate that those were past discussions, but they were still talking about the presence of the SSE in the proximity of the power block. We'll litigate this in the docket, don't worry, but I'm just saying, I hope you understand why we have a rational concern, having seen what's been said before. I mean, this has been repeated for years, right up through 2012, that the proximity of the ISFISI would complicate the demolition of the power block.
Understood and agreed. What I'm having trouble with is that the basis of the statements has changed. If we want to know definitively whether or not the ISFISI pads, wherever they're to be located, are going to interfere with the decommissioning of the plant, I would say, since we have an open docket, we should ask the question and put it on the record. But to be asking the Entergy employees or Entergy reps, or for that matter the state reps at a citizen advisory panel meeting to make a firm guarantee is, I mean, I'd like to ask some firm guarantees of things from my state legislators, but I know better than that as well.
But I will, this is my last thing, Kate, I will note that this is also an assertion made in the site assessment study on page 24 that was filed last December.
Perhaps, this is Chris, perhaps a way of dealing with this is to, in the other resolution that supports the construction of the ISFISI pad in its proposed location, is to add something there about subject to the guarantee that this does not interfere with decontamination and dismantlement activities. I don't know if that gets you where you want to go based on where kind of we are this evening.
I think one of the problems we have here is that on the one hand, no one can legitimately sit here tonight and guarantee anything. And on the other hand, in all fairness, guarantees in the past have been pretty almost water soluble. So because things change, you can't. I mean, people make the strongest statements they can on the record when they're seeking to secure or oppose something, and then things change. Perhaps an alternative to both of these is a different recommendation that says the panel advises this is off the top of my head now, but the panel strongly advises the Public Service Board to consider whether such a guarantee could be sought. That if the assumptions about fuel removal are wrong, or if the statements about a lack of interference are wrong, then the additional costs will not fall to the state of Vermont or to the trust fund. And that would be a request for such a thing to be made, not to us, but on the record to the Public Service Board.
Kate, Bill Irwin wishes to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Well, thank you. Yes, I appreciate the last statement Jim Matteau made. I think that would be a better alternative to either of the particular advisory opinions provided now. I think for us to take a position for or against the current debate before the Public Service Board in the current docket might not be as useful as pointing out this very important concern that we have that the second ISFISI, as described in the PSDAR, as an expansion of the current one, not interfere with the dismantling of decontamination and add costs that are born out of the decommissioning trust fund.
Madam Chair,
Hey, Pat.
this is Pat.
Hey, Pat. Are you okay?
I think this discussion has been very helpful, but it also is becoming apparent to me that we're not going to come to an agreement on any of these advisory opinions this evening. So what I'd like to suggest is that we continue this discussion to identify any other or additional areas of disagreement so that we could, and maybe a series of straw polls to start to get at a sense of what would a single advisory opinion contain. Alternatively, consider a working group who could perhaps go to work on some sort of a consensus document that we could come to. Because it's pretty apparent, I agree there'll be no guarantees made this evening. People are going to have to go back and consider and caucus, etc. But if we could at least identify the areas of contention and or the areas of consensus, we could start to get a sense of what a single advisory opinion could look like.
I'll let Paul Paradise say something, and then we'll talk about what you just said, Pat.
Okay. First thing, Chris Campany, I understand what you said, but I think you said it would impact it, and that's not what the site assessment study says. It says it may, right? So I think we've got to keep that in mind. And the other point of if we put something different in either one of these where we say we're going to ask the Public Service Board to provide a guarantee, then I will not be able to vote on either one of that, anything like that. I can vote on either one of these, but I would not be able to vote on that. And I'm not sure anyone who's in litigation for this CPG would be able to vote on it. So I would recommend that we vote on these as written.
I think Pat has started a discussion that we may be ready to have, because I think if the next question for us is going to be, are we going to vote on both of these? Are we going to merge them into one? Are we going to not? And honestly,
If we're around the table right now, just my sense is there are people that support, there are people, around the table.
Debate it out there, Kate.
Yeah, we're having issues here. If I get the sense of what people are saying,
Okay, yell into it. That's usually.
I'm going to yell into it. If the it's not working, none of them are working.
He now has 4 microphones.
No, still not coming through.
We're still working. Hello. No.
Thanks.
Okay.
This one works. Okay, I think the whole sound system has cut out.
Check.
Can you guys hear me on the phone if I yell?
Evidently not.
Yeah, I heard you ask the question.
I'm going to try restarting this. What the heck?
That's what we got.
There we go. Is that working?
Try that again, Kate. Yeah, good.
Can you hear it? No, it's not doing anything. If I scream really loud, can you guys hear me on the phone?
okay. Oh, here we go. Now you can hear me too loud. Based on what I am hearing, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, there are people that are supporting, you have people supporting each one. So I think the question is, and I think Pat raised the question, are we ready to move forward,
voting on each one? Obviously, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound really bizarre yelling. Obviously, if before we would vote on one or both or the other, whatever, we can just look and make sure everybody's comfortable with the language, and if we want to change words and everything. But it seems to me that we're at a place where I've heard people on one side and I've heard people for the other. So I don't know how people, David has a suggestion, I can tell.
I have a suggestion question here. The question is on the Entergy version, there is the language in there the paragraph that says note to panel. I just want clarification. Are we looking that that note to panel paragraph will be in the finished version, or is that just our edification here?
No, there's a clean version.
Without the note?
So the clean version lacks the note. Okay. To that end, I would suggest that we're at that point that there's not a middle of the road here, and that if we're going to proceed, we put each of these up for a vote.
Can I just clarify something?
I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
I thought the clean had it. Yeah, the clean has it.
So the recommendation, we would take the note out.
Remove the note?
Remove the note.
Okay. So,
Can I make a procedural?
Yes.
So I'd like to just suggest a procedure here. This may or may not be in accordance to Robert's rules, but as Kate said at the start of this, we're kind of breaking new ground. In fact, I think there is some procedure in Robert's rules for voting on several alternatives. So I think that the way to proceed here is just to go down the table and for everybody to state which of these they support, if any, and if none, then they abstain, and that we go on the record that way. And I think that other than the correcting 2016 to 2026, that we have not had any suggestions for changes of language, so I think we should proceed with these as they are.
I have, just for the record, I have one proposed change, but I'll let Chris Recchia go first.
Well, thank you, Kate. Okay, and I think this has been a great discussion. I really do, on all sides. But it makes me realize that the fundamental question here
is whether these, whether the existing site will interfere either by cost or time with the decontamination dismantlement of the site. And I think that fundamental question is what drives this. And now that we've had this discussion and don't have an answer to that, I'm uncomfortable with both of these. I'm uncomfortable with moving, automatically saying we should move to a third location. I'm uncomfortable with endorsing the current location. So that's where I am now.
Can I just ask, can I ask a question about that?
Yes, but loudly.
Is there an answer to that question? Or are we just delaying the inevitable of never, I mean, we could come back month after month. Do you know, Paul?
I would say you're probably not going to get an answer to that question right now, and it'll probably come when you actually start doing decon and dismantlement. And then the piece of, if you want to put a guarantee in there, I guess it would, to me, it'd be how would you monitor that from the cost perspective and the time perspective when you're doing a large project like that. That would be very difficult to do. The only other comment I'll make is when we scheduled this meeting, we did it because of time, because this needed to be in front of the Public Service Board. And if we go and say we're going to have other meetings and write a different opinion paper, I think we're probably not going to meet that timeline.
Yeah, Jim Matlow again. Nope.
I appreciate Chris Recchia's comment. I think I've learned a lot. I hope others have. And that is really the crux of the matter. And guarantees are well, they should never be easy to make, and they're hard to keep. But maybe the issue is that we as a panel are concerned that the Public Service Board needs strong assurance in the process of this docket that there will be no financial or time injury to the trust fund or to the state of Vermont. And maybe we need to draft something, and maybe we can do it quickly. Maybe a working group could do that. That would would convey that concern to the Public Service Board if people agreed with that, as opposed to recommending A or recommending B. Let them know that we've had this discussion and we're really concerned that we don't know the answer and we think they need to be sure they get it.
I guess the only issue I would have with us saying that there is zero cost and zero time, I don't think I've said that once tonight, that there's no significant cost increase, no significant time delays. So I think I would have a hard time supporting that.
You would have a hard time supporting no significant?
No, I would support that. But then, you know, how do you define that?
Which one?
Which one of work? Let's see.
Hello, Convoy. Okay. So I personally like. I mean, to me, that and for the Wyndham Regional Commission, frankly, that is the crux of the matter, because we do not want to burden future generations because with a decision made now, and that's what we've been saying from the outset. So. I would love for us to work out a decision like that, and maybe that could even ultimately form the basis of a MOU going to the Public Service Board. And to me, then we have a nice, good collaborative discussion to try to get us all to where we want to be, and just have a good, forthright conversation as opposed to just going through attorneys or filings and this or that. We could. So I personally, I would almost suggest withdraw the two, so we can work on the one.
We are not scheduled to meet. Oh, Pat?
Yeah. An alternative, I heard, I'm not sure who it was mentioning before, that maybe it was Jim Matteau, that we might consider an alternative advisory opinion that essentially alerts the board to some of our concerns, and I could support that. And some of the concerns I would add, that we would like the board to confirm that the location of the second ISPC pad, and perhaps even the first, so still thinking about that, will not impede decommissioning. And can the board confirm whether or not a third pad will be needed, and can the board confirm if that third pad is needed, how that will be paid for? And that we advise the board of our concerns around these areas, since I don't believe we're going to find a way to come to consensus. I personally don't feel like I have the technical knowledge, because I don't believe we've had any presentations. If we haven't, I've missed them. My apologies, on things like whether or not the ISPC pad impedes decommissioning, and whether or not a third may be required, and how that cost could possibly be borne or has been dealt with in other plants. So I don't feel like I'm in a position to vote on either of these opinions, and so maybe our best bet to achieve consensus is to advise the board of our concerns.
I think the question now is, if we choose to not vote on these two and we want to come back together, or somebody wants to have a working group, we're not scheduled to meet again until, what is it, January 28th? I don't know what that does in terms of sending something to the Public Service Board.
Technical.
Madam Chair, the board will hear what we have to say, and they will give it the weight that they feel it deserves, given its timing, given its content, given its backup, and I don't want to be, if you will, held hostage to thinking that we should not do this up because the Public Service Board is going to continue moving forward. I believe we were told at the last meeting, and Commissioner Recchi, you could refresh my memory anyhow, that in fact it will be spring, early spring, before the board reaches a decision.
So we have the time if we wanted to.
I think we probably have a month that we could do this in. I wouldn't suggest waiting. I think David, Representative Dean is correct that the board is anticipated to make a decision in the spring, but I don't think the docket would be open that entire time. So I think to influence the docket, I would suggest we do what Chris Campany just suggested a moment ago within the next month. Sound good?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I've just pulled up the schedule for the second ISFC, and the technical hearings, that they have not been scheduled yet, but they are noted in the scheduling order as being the week of February 22nd. So if someone can correct me here, my understanding is the panel could submit something up to that date without impeding the current schedule.
I guess the only comment I got is people keep mentioning a third pad. I think the third pad would be a pad out in a different location, not that we need more. So I think we just got to make sure if we're going to put an opinion that the third pad is an alternate location, not we know how much fuel is there, we know how many canisters, and the existing submittal for the CPG will support all the fuel that is in the fuel pool at this time.
Okay, so it appears, can the people on the phone, do you have any more comments? Okay.
I like the idea of third opinion rather than voting on these two tonight, and the opinion that was voiced by Jim and Hamilton seemed to capture a lot of it.
This is Diane, I agree.
Okay, great. So it's...
No, I feel this is Pat. I don't see consensus on these two, so a third seems the only way for any kind of consensus. And refresh my memory, I think consensus was our intent on these advisory opinions. Is that correct?
My memory is that it's our goal, but we recognize that in fact there might be split decisions, and if so, that we would incorporate any minority opinion.
All right, so what we need...
It's a lofty goal, and I have no problem continuing to pursue that, and would in fact endorse your position, Pat. And I would ask the chair that I think it's a good idea to have a working group try and pull this together, and I would suggest that if you decide to do that, that people from both sides or both advisory opinions be placed on that working group.
Yeah, everybody seems to be nodding their head. So I think we've reached consensus that we want to put a working group together to come up with, I don't want to call it a third opinion, but a new opinion. And then we'll move forward and we'll discuss this at the January 28th meeting. Is that agreed on that? Right. Yeah. So would somebody like to, I don't know if we have to vote on that, but we can do it just so we are on the record. Would everybody like to do that? So does somebody want to make a motion? That we put a working group together to work on a new opinion on the CPG on the second ISPC. That would be the motion if somebody wants to say. Oh, good, David. Anyone seconding it? David's first and seconding it. Okay. Now we have to, because we have people on the phone, we all have to vote. So we'll start with Steve and we'll just go right around. Ann? Pat? Bill? And David? Great. We did it. Now the question is, who would like to be on the working group?
Well, would like to be
who, who, yeah, yeah. Chris, the two Chris's, Jim, Steve, Paul, and if I'll do it too, just to be the, anyone on the phone, would you like to be on the working group? We have Chris Campney, Chris Recchia, Jim Matteau, Steve Skibniowski, sorry Steve, Paul Paradise, and I will do it if I have to, as the neutral party. So would anyone on the phone like to be on it? Okay. Okay, so that's what it appears that will be, and the goal, well, it has to be, we have to have something to present and possibly vote on if we're successful at the January 28th meeting. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah, yeah. Well, you never know, the working group may.
The board has also been known, no, I shouldn't say that publicly, about their schedule.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I'll make sure that we get it, we figure out when we can all meet. Okay, that's a really good segue into what we're going to do in 2016. And we still have, well, I thought we had only 2 advisory opinions, now we still have 3, so we still have 3 to go, which is including the one we just talked about, the groundwater monitoring and the RERP. And the Issues Committee had a meeting, and we had a plan, which may not be the plan anymore, but David Andrews is assuring me that we can do it. So why don't, David, if you want to give a little briefing on what we talked about at the Issues Committee meeting going forward.
Very good. So what we looked at was Thursday, January 28th will be the January meeting. If you notice, one of the exceptions, we're already kind of in exception mode here. We were looking to do a education and an issues segment of each meeting. And tonight, because of the nature of what we're dealing with here, there's no education part. The January meeting is, well, originally was going to be education-based, but now it's going to be education issues. So the January meeting, we've got tentatively Dave Howland and Trey coming up from the Mass DEP to talk about the Yankee Row experience. It's not me. The Yankee Row experience, specifically in terms of the discoveries as they went and what issues they had and the contamination levels and the findings. That sets us up for the February meeting where we'll be tackling the groundwater monitoring advisory position. In addition to that, at the January meeting, we'll have some time to talk about the annual report and possibly what we had spoken about was having a contingent travel up to Montpelier. So instead of just throwing this in the mail, we'll actually be going up and presenting this as a living document, put a face to it. And finally, at the January meeting, we'll guaranteed we'll have approval of the working group, or at least a vote on the working group's opinion here. The February meeting is February 26th. The decision was made there is going to be a February meeting, and that meeting will not have an education part. It will be issue related, and it's the advisory opinion on the groundwater monitoring. Immediately after the January meeting, the day after, we're penciling in the next issues meeting where we'll finalize February and determine whether or not we're doing March or if it's going to be March to April. We'll attack that at that point. That's the scope of the Issues Committee at this point going forward.
Does anyone on the phone have any comments about that plan? Or have any questions on what we just said? Oh. Was that Pat?
It seems like that quick vision as well. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Diane.
question about when the expectation was for what meeting the radiological emergency response plan would be discussed.
That was going to be my next question. Pat, do you have a question first, and then we'll ask it, we'll address Diane's?
No, it seems like a pretty ambitious agenda, but no, I have no question.
Okay. Because we do still have the radiological emergency response plan, I don't know if there's a timing issue on that. I don't know if anybody here can answer that question. Because if we have January and February, nobody has an answer. Can this one go farther? The RERP? Is there a deadline for that?
I know there was no deadline, but we were looking at getting the RERP immediately after the groundwater monitoring.
That's right.
So I'm thinking that when we have the January issues meeting, that we're going to be probably looking at doing a March meeting and doing our RERP at March, but that hasn't been.
But there's no reason we can't wait until March or April. That's pretty much the question. Hey, Bill, were you saying something?
Yeah, this is Bill Irwin. I agree with David that it's not likely that delaying discussion of the maintenance of the radiological emergency response plan to April would create a problem. The funding for the state continues through this current fiscal year, which ends June 30th. But obviously, any opinion that can be arrived at earlier provides all parties some greater confidence that the opinion will make a difference for those discussions that might ensue as we get closer to that deadline.
This is Diane. Just a quick question in terms of the discussion regarding the radiological emergency response plan, because that does talk about an emergency response area that's greater than just in the state of Vermont. And I guess the question I have is, what is the anticipation of any opinion that is done through NDCAP have on the EPZ, the current EPZ communities in either of the other states?
Well, this is Bill Irwin. I wrote the current draft of the EPZ opinion, or RERP advisory opinion, and the opinion does not describe that it is an issue that is only for the benefit of Vermont. It really describes how all parties, NDCAP, are interested in assuring that whatever incidents might occur, there is a capacity off-site to be able to provide with answers. However, it may be worth revisiting that, of course, and we will at the time that advisory opinion is taken up.
Great, thank you, Bill.
Okay, so the plan for meeting dates would be January 28th and then February 25th. No, 25th. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're looking, I'm sorry, yes. We met February 26, 2015. We're going to meet February 25th, 2016. Now, I want to bring up something, and I'm going to be having a conversation with Trey Martin tomorrow, so I'll have a better idea about what we're going to talk about at the January meeting. So hopefully this won't all fall through, but I'm going to know more tomorrow. What I just want to have a brief conversation about, the last meeting, Chris Recchia made a motion that, that we meet every month, or we put in, I had a discussion with other panel members about this, so I just want to clarify it, that we meet every month unless the chair finds that it's not necessary. What I would like to do, and whether we have to have a motion or clarify this in some way, if people agree with me on this, is to say that our standard practice is going to be to meet every other month unless we deem it necessary to have a meeting, such as what we did this time. The reason I say that, first of all, I don't like it to be all on me, that it's going to be my decision that we don't meet. But second, in consultation, and one of the things we have to do in January is have an election, so I haven't talked to Martin, but if anybody wants to throw their hat in the ring, you know, just let me know. One of the things that I would like, and we've been really good at it so far, so it's not that I'm passing judgment on how we're doing the meetings, but I want to make sure when we have a meeting, it's really substantive, and the reason for everybody to come, and the reason for the public to come, because the last thing I think any of us want is, you know, to have somebody come to a meeting and go, why did I come to that? And then they're not going to want to come to the next one, and the public's not going to want to come to the next one. So, you know, just as we did here, we decided we needed to put a meeting in, and obviously we've decided now we have to put a February meeting in. I would like to do it that way as opposed to, and maybe it's semantics, but
I think one of the reasons that we thought that the motion, that Chris's motion was a good idea, because we thought it was easier to delete a meeting than to add meetings. And so everybody seems to be pretty favorable of putting every month on their calendar and then knocking it off, as opposed to going to every other month and then, oh, I think we're going to have to fit one in here, and then all of a sudden nobody's got it on their calendar ahead of time.
Yeah, to me also, I think that
Derek, Jordan, it might be a good idea to front load the year because we have so much work to do in terms of getting out these opinions. It makes sense to maybe meet every month for the first 6 months and then decide later.
So I still think, knowing schedules the way they are, and to really build on Jim's point, it sounds like we could all put in our calendar the fourth Thursday of every month and say our plan is to meet every other month. But each month that we meet, we could reach ahead a couple of months and say, hey, do we think we need the odd number month or not? Right, but I think if they don't get on the calendar, we're going to have a hard time getting a quorum, because with 19 people scheduling their time, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing about not putting, like, we should all put it on the calendar, but I'm just worried about the what is the expectation of when we put it on the calendar? Yeah, as long as we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I guess I'm not on the same page with everybody, because I think if you look at tonight, there's a lot of people missing. And if you have a meeting every month, there's going to be a lot of people missing every month. So I agree. I don't think it hurts to put it on the calendar, but I also think we need to be disciplined to say we're not going to meet every month unless it's really a special occasion. But I think what happens is you feel obligated to meet when you do have it on the calendar. So
and that's what sort of where I was coming from, that we just have to make sure that we're having a meeting for a really good reason, as opposed to feeling like we have to. And again, it might just all be semantics, but does that make sense? So now that we're talking about meetings, right now we're going January and February, and we haven't made a decision beyond that. Yeah, we'll take 2 months off. I'll just give a little update on this so people know. We did have Chris Campney, Chris Recchi, and I had a conversation about resources going forward, and we have to continue having that conversation because we all got busy, speaking of being busy, and we haven't followed up on that. But we are going to try to figure out a way that we can have some kind of resources for the panel, so it if it's necessary to continue on after we're all gone, that maybe we can have, there can be some groundwork so that that can happen. Because if I said, if we're all hit by a bus, where does this thing go? So we're trying to figure out a way to sort of more institutionalize it. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, I'm going to take it to public comment unless anybody on the panel. Does anyone on the phone want to say anything? Doesn't sound like it. Oh, Chris Campney.
There we go. I sent around to everybody, there was a National Association of Development Organizations webinar yesterday held for the host communities to be aware of the rulemaking. So that's already, I mean, the panel should congratulate itself because that's already progress based on, that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without this panel making that decision. So that's good. And that, I can send around the link to that, the slides and the entire recorded webinar is available if people want to spend an exciting good hour and 20 minutes perusing it. And Jen Stromston, I know that you guys recorded the panels at the Association of Environmental Health and Sciences Northeast meeting. Is that available publicly for people to watch? What's that? Okay. One of the things I was thinking about is the morning panel had Massachusetts, Entergy, I forget who all else on it, but anyway, it might be a good thing just for people to look at before even the January meeting if they've got time, because it might help make our education panel make a little bit more sense, or help people even frame some questions they might want to come with. So, Jen, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I guess, sorry I did. But anyway, if we can be in touch and just see what might be possible, it's a great resource.
I just want to add, you didn't quite say it, but on that NATO panel, Chris was a panelist and Jen was a panelist. So we have two of the three panelists on a national panel right here, which I think is a little indication that we are kind of taking some national leadership here, and we should keep trying to do that.
Okay, now I'll open it to public comment. Does anyone in the public have anything that they want to say? I don't see anybody. So let me just say one more time, we're going to meet again on January 28th, and then again on February 25th. We are going to have an election in January, so if anybody wants to serve, just let me know. Everybody jumping. I think one thing that I just want to bring up is that if the NRC does not extend the comment period before January 4th, obviously we're not going to meet again. The citizens group, I think what we're going to do, we'll be prepared to have something ready to go if it's not extended. Obviously, we can look towards, maybe Chris, if there's something that we would be helpful if we made a comment on, we would do that, or if Entergy had something that would be helpful for us to comment on. I know there are things that are specifically about public participation, but I have a feeling we might weigh in on the PSDAR part and all that stuff. So obviously when we move, if we find out on January 3rd, we'll have more time to coordinate, but if we don't, we're going to be ready to go with something, I think, as at least the citizen, if we can't go forward as a panel.
And we will have to prepare something. Again, hopefully they will announce an extension soon so that we can all take a deep breath. But otherwise, we will have to work on something because we do intend to submit comments on that.
And Paul, I know Entergy's already submitted comments, which makes perfect sense. But am I correct in my understanding that the Nuclear Energy Institute has asked for an extension as well?
I don't know for sure if that's happened. I can find out. Okay. So I'll send something out.
Okay. Chris, I may be able to add something to that. I have been told by NRC Region 1 that NEI would be requesting an extension of the period. However, in the public meeting on this yesterday, their representatives, mostly from Exelon, stated that they were working towards delivering comments on January 4th. So to me, that sounds like even though they talked about it, they're not going to be requesting it. However, there are other organizations that have requested it, and I did speak with NRC Region 1 yesterday to kind of get the large clue-by-4 out to NRC headquarters to say, hey, please extend this. It would be very useful.
Get our letter soon. All right, yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. All right, is there anybody else on the panel that has any comments? Does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? Oh. Yeah, nobody wanted to comment.
Okay. All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second.
I'll second it.
Third. Fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tony, for making everything work.
And Happy New Year, everybody.